Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Spiritism Talk series promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm very happy to host this talk from Daniel Ortiz Martinez, who will be talking about reincarnation, connecting ourselves to our past, present, and future. Let's all give Daniel a warm welcome. And before he starts his presentation, please let me introduce him more formally. Daniel Ortiz Martinez is a chemical engineer with a master's degree in marketing and a Master of Science degree in nanoscience and advanced materials. Daniel has been living in Belgium since 2009. He has been a Spiritist since childhood and has been working within the Spiritist movement in Belgium for about 15 years. Nowadays, Daniel is a member of the Center of Spiritist Studies, Camille Flammarion. The acronym is NEECAFLA. In Brussels, where he is a speaker and has many other responsibilities. Please take this opportunity to send your questions during the presentation using the chat window. Daniel has reserved time to address his comments and questions once he concludes his presentation. So welcome, Daniel. Glad you could join us.
Thank you, Peter. So it's really a very nice opportunity. It's an honor to be back here once again and to share with all of you some thoughts about reincarnation. As you mentioned, today's talk is about the reincarnation and how it can connect us to our past, our present, and to our future. So in the next half an hour, 35 minutes, I'm going to go through all these topics, and we will start by saying that this talk is highly based on the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 4, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he is born again. And we are going to open discussing reincarnation through human history, how it is present, how it influenced some of the most prominent philosophies throughout the world. And we will discuss also how reincarnation is present in the Gospels and how they were mentioned by Jesus in many times, many occasions of his life. We will do a deep dive in terms of the concept of reincarnation, try to understand a little bit more what this is all about. And of course, a very important part of it is how to correlate the divine justice with reincarnation through the law of cause and effect, or through the law of karma, as some people prefer to mention. And at the end of my talk, I'm going to wrap up with some thoughts about reincarnation and evolution, and how reincarnation, how our deeds can really shape our future lives according to our choices. And to finish, we will have one last slide with nice messages, is saying a few things about connecting the past, present, and the future. So I like to open with a very simple question, so we can set a little bit the scene of this talk. And the question is, has Spiritism invented reincarnation? Because we discuss a lot reincarnation in the Spiritist media. So do you think that Spiritism has came up with it? Of course, the answer is no. Reincarnation has always been there, has always existed, and it is a law of nature. We studied a lot. It's one of the founding principles of Spiritism, but no, it existed before. And just to illustrate you that, if we go back in time, all sacred books, whether we are talking about ancient Egypt like 5,000 years ago, whether we're talking about India with the Vedas, with the Brahmins, Krishna, whether we're talking about China, the Chaldean initiates, and even the Greeks and the Romans, and I'm going to talk about the Greeks a little bit later on. including the Bible itself. All these sacred books, they clearly mention the transmigrations of the souls from one body to another. The Bible itself, in the book of Job, openly speaks about the body changes. And Moses, 1200 years before Christ, he knew this truth in depth since he was initiated in the schools of Old Egypt. As you remember, Moses was raised to be one of the princes of Egypt and was taken by the Pharaoh itself. Buddha, 500 years before Christ, taught this truth in a very open way to his disciples. Was the same with Socrates, and he knew the law of multiple lives. And his disciple Plato, he found God's justice in successive lives, much like what we see today in modern Spiritism. Pythagoras lived more than 30 years in Egypt among great masters, and he had absolutely no doubt about this subject, which was something quite usual for him. The great Chinese sage Confucius was really familiar with the return of the spirit to the flesh as many times as necessary, and having a very interesting concept, which is seeing the flesh as a filter or some sort of sponge in order to absorb the impurities of the soul. We have a very similar concept in the Spiritism as well. And St. Augustine, one of the fathers of the Catholic Church, he suggests that he had a knowledge on the multiplicity of forms of a single soul. These texts, they were extracted from the book Francis of Assisi, sent by the spirit of Miramis and written by the medium João Nunes Maia. And back to the Greek, if we dig a little bit deeper in Socrates and Plato's doctrine, we can see that they state the human being is an incarnate soul. Before its incarnation, it existed in union with the primordial types. So they state here the pre-existence of the soul before the incarnation, before the dive into a flesh body. And after the death, their spirit or daemon, as they used to call it by then, who had been assigned to us during life, leads us to a place where all those who must be taken to Hades. Hades is what we would call the spiritual world, and they're gathered in order to be judged. So very similar to what we know in the modern Spiritism. And then, after having remained in Hades for the time being, for the time required, the same souls, they are reconducted to this life for numerous and longer periods. That was so strong in Socrates' philosophy that Kardec himself took this doctrine, took these statements, and used it in the introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism. And this is really the doctrine of the guardian angels or protector spirits, and of course, the doctrine of the successive reincarnations after periods of varying length in the errant state, just like we know in the Spiritism. I brought you another example that is a very strong one. This picture on the right-hand side is of Francis of Assisi, and once he was having a very meaningful conversation with Friar Leon, one of his most beloved disciples, and he mentioned to him that since the advent of the gospel, from the sacrifice of Jesus until Calvary, nothing for him, none of those events were hidden from him. And he could see them whenever he wanted or even at unexpected times. So all of that was really real for him. And he mentions, I see myself preaching the gospel in ancient times with a clarity that leaves absolutely no doubt that we lived in that time. So he was having memories of 1200 years before the present life he was having, and that's when we notice how beautiful this soul was. he had a very strong sense of priority and obedience. And he said, and he used to say that at the same moment he feels, and he used to feel a force in his chest, a gigantic command in his mind, saying that he had more urgent work to do within the community he belonged to before announcing this truth that surely would overthrow ancient conceptions. And when, as he has this conversation with Friar Leon, he replies back to him, speaking under the influence of a spirit. And he states clearly, Francis, the experiences that you're having of Francis reviving John are due to the fact that John the Evangelist is the same Francis of Assisi of our days. And this is a law, and I stress it again, a law that a large part of humanity is unaware of, but it's not yet time to propagate it among the faithful of the church to which you belong. Be prudent, because you're dealing with souls with a different structure from those born in the Orient. And it's true that reincarnation is much more accepted on the eastern side of the globe, Hindus, the Buddhists, and so on, than on the western side of our planet. And again, these statements, they were extracted from the book Francis of Assisi, from Mirames and João Nunes Maia. And if we go back in time and move to the Gospels, there are some very strong examples that were given by Jesus explaining, mentioning reincarnation with the words of the time, of course. And like the dialogue that was registered by Matthew here, right after the transfiguration, and his disciples asked him, why then do the scribes say that it's necessary for Elijah to come first? And then Jesus comes with his answer. It is true that Elijah must come first and establish all things, but I declare that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him and treated him as they wished. And this is quite interesting, then the disciples realized, understood that it was John the Baptist he was talking about by that moment. But he does not stop there, because, again, during the parallel between John the Baptist and Elijah, Jesus says that since the time of John the Baptist until present, the kingdom of heaven has been taken by violence, and violent are those who obtain it. For up until John, all the prophets and the law thus prophesies. And this is really powerful. This is really interesting. And if you wish to understand what I have said, he himself, John the Baptist, is Elijah who must come. So Jesus here is extremely assertive. It's a very positive, affirmative statement saying that person A is the reincarnation of person B. But it's not only that. I brought you here one of the most famous dialogues of the Gospels. It's the dialogue between Nicodemus, a Pharisee, a sort of senator of the Jews, and Jesus. And Jesus opens the conversation by saying, no one can see the kingdom of God unless he's born again. And then Nicodemus, probably that was the question of his life when he addressed it to Jesus. But how can a man who's already old be born? Can he enter back his mother's womb in order to be born a second time? You see, the idea of living another life was there, but the mechanisms were not known. And then Jesus answers back. So if a man is not born again of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Bear in mind that water represented the material element and the Spirit, of course, the spiritual element. And whatever is born from flesh is flesh, whatever is born from spirit is spirit, and he's really stating independence of the physical nature, the body, and the soul. So do not be surprised that I have said to you that it is necessary for you to be born again. But probably the most emblematic event that is mentioned about the reincarnation in the Gospels is when Jesus saw a blind man, a blind from birth, and the disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Let's pause for a moment. Why would they do this question, assuming that that man has always been blind could have sinned? And why did he ask about his parents? Because that was in the law, in Moses' law, and we're going to see why. And the answer is neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in him. And if we go back in time again, precisely 1200 years before this encounter of Jesus with the blind man, Moses in the book of Exodus says, or registered, you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, I'm a jealous one, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me. So in their minds, someone who might be experiencing a situation or a problem or an illness, that might be the result of the punishment for someone else, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And we're going to understand why they thought like that and what Moses meant when he wrote that in a couple of slides. So, jumping into the concept of reincarnation. Reincarnation, yes, that was part of the Jewish dogmas, but under the name of resurrection. Only another political party, the Sadducees, did not believe in it because they only believed in the present life. Once that was done, it was it. But in spite of the fact that they believed that a person who had lived could live again, they couldn't really figure out what mechanism was behind it, what was the exact manner in which that could happen. And they designated by the word of resurrection what Spiritism more correctly nowadays calls reincarnation. And the concepts are quite different because when we speak about resurrection, that supposes the return to life of the body that died, the same body. We know that it's physically, chemically, thermodynamically, and biologically impossible. So science says no, that's not a thing. Reincarnation, on the other hand, is the return of a soul or of a spirit to corporeal life, but in another body, newly formed for that purpose, and having nothing in common, nothing to do with the old one, and that as many times as necessary. So the concept here is a little bit different. So the essence of the human being, which is the soul, is preserved, and then the material part perishes. But since the essence is preserved, it comes back from time to time. And reincarnation, again, it's a law of nature and is one of the basic principles of Spiritism. It's one of the founding principles of Spiritism. And I would go back to the previous teachings of the gospel. So when Jesus says that John Baptist was Elijah, John's body couldn't have been the one of Elijah's, since John had been seen as a child and everybody knew his parents by then. So John could be Elijah reincarnated, but not resuscitated. And the strongest part of it is when Jesus says, without any room for doubts, he himself is Elijah who must come. So there's no symbol here. There's no allegory here. It's a really positive affirmation, a really positive statement. And what we need to understand, though, is that as I mentioned before, is that in the Jewish culture by then, water was perceived as the absolute generative element. So all life came from water, which scientifically is correct. And it is the symbol of the material nature, just as spirit was the symbol of the intelligent nature. And knowing that, and you go back to the words Jesus says to Nicodemus. So if a man is not born again of water and spirit, means that if a man is not born again with his body and his soul, and whatever is born of the flesh is flesh, whatever is born of the spirit is a spirit. And these clearly states again the distinction, the independence between spirit and body. And if we go back to the Gospel according to Spiritism, more precisely in chapter 14, we're going to see the same statement. The body proceeds from the body, but the spirit does not proceed from the spirit, because the spirit already existed before the formation of the body. So here, they're independent things. The parents do not create the spirit of the children. They just furnish them with their corporeal envelope. So it's just the parents who just provide the genetic, the physical body, but the essence itself is coming from somewhere else. And again, in the gospel, when the question is asked, who sinned? Was it this man right here or his parents? So he was born blind. There is an indication there of the intuition of a previous existence. Otherwise, it wouldn't have any sense to ask such a question. And again, so if that question was a mistake, Jesus would have said that. He would have seen a false idea there, and he would say, no, please stop. That's your question has no sense. But no, he continued with that. And why did he do that? Because that situation, that illness, that condition was a trial for that man. A trial that can only be explained if we understand reincarnation and if we understand the law of cause and effect. And these two, they really go together, hand in hand. Cause and effect, or action and reaction, as we like to say, among spiritists, or if you prefer, karma, like we do mention in the Eastern cultures. So they really go together, and they have an impact one on the other. And having said that, the next thing that we need to discuss is how divine justice and reincarnation interact. How does one correlate with the other? And this is something that Kardec also addressed. Here I share with you an extract of the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 4. And when the spirits are making an analysis of this, cause and effect and reincarnation aspects. And it states that when one wants to go from the effects all the way back to the cause, reincarnation is an absolute necessity. It's a condition inherent to humanity. And in other words, it is a law of nature. I think that I repeated that reincarnation is a law of nature at least 4 or 5 times here, because it's really, and it's a very powerful one. Being aware of this law changes everything. And you're going to see that in a couple of slides. Only the doctrine of reincarnation can tell human beings where they came from, where they are going to, and why they are on Earth, and justify all the apparent anomalies and injustice that life presents. I mean, we have these recurring questions. Where do we came from? Where are we going to? Why are we? This is the thing that only reincarnation, the knowledge of reincarnation and past lives can explain, can provide. And to conclude this part here, Without the principle of pre-existence of soul and the plurality of existences, most of the maxims in the gospel wouldn't make any sense, would be unintelligible. This principle is really the key that must restore them to their true meaning. But that wasn't enough, because Kardec, in the question 171 on the Spirits books, he asks again, and he says, on what is this doctrine of reincarnation based? Why? What are the founding principles of that? And the answer is magnificent: on the justice of God. As simple as that. And here the comparison, the analogy that is done here is quite simple, quite easy to understand. A good father always leaves the door open, the door of repentance open to his children. Doesn't reason tell you that it would be at least unjust to keep eternal bliss from those who have not enjoyed the opportunities needed to improve themselves? God allows them to accomplish in a new existence whatever they could not do, complete, or finish in a present one or in a previous trial. And this is logical. Reason confirms that. And that's what the spirits have taught us. Again, this is logical. And bearing this in mind, we go back to the statement of Moses in the book of Exodus, when he says that the third and the fourth generation would atone for the faults of the previous ones. What is he talking about indeed? So he's making reference to ourselves, but in previous lives. So 3 or 4 incarnations later, so we are the grandchildren or the grandchildren of ourselves. And we're being held accountable for the mistakes that we made. And we need to adjust, and we need to correct some of the faults of the past. Hence, we need the challenges, hence we need the trials in new lives. In other words, that's quite simple as principle. Basically, we reap what we sow. And the law of cause effect is really divine. It is everywhere. But we are the ones who are experiencing it. We are the ones who are manipulating, living through it. With what? With free will, with our choices, with our acts, with our deeds. And this only shows us that we are the heirs of ourselves. And reincarnation gives us, and for me, this is one of the most beautiful aspects of reincarnation. It gives us the notion of continuation. I mean, I'm going to pick up from where I left lives ago. It gives us the notion of a new beginning, of new opportunities. And this is nothing but logical. I like very much this Brazilian speaker. He's a spiritist speaker. His name is Harold Dutra Diaz. And his view on reincarnation is really interesting, because he's mentioning that one life is too short, and it is too short, for us to learn everything. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to learn. We need more than one existence to carry out this learning. We need more than one existence to solve our emotional problems, to continue what was not possible, what was left behind in a previous life. Reincarnation is actually a proof of God's goodness, who is always renewing opportunities. And it carries on, saying that reincarnation is really a journey during which we re-encounter adversaries of the past, but also friends, but also fellows, in an attempt to reconcile, to forgive, to love, but most importantly, to build history again, to retell the story of our lives. And that's why we reincarnate. And this is so strong that if you go back in time 160 years ago, that was one of the questions from Kardec to the spirits in the Spirits book, question 167. Why do we incarnate? We reincarnate for our moral and intellectual progress, for the atonement of our faults, that's a sure thing, but in a nutshell, we reincarnate to evolve. And knowing all that, now make a pause, and we should ask us a couple of questions, because the idea here is now to see this correlation, how we are shaping our future with our present deeds. And the most natural question to be asked is, what are we doing with our present incarnation? What are we doing with our present life? Part of the answer I'm bringing through this Zen Buddhist monk. She's called Monk Cohen. She's a Brazilian lady. She lived a couple of years in the US as well. And there's a very interesting reflection about what we are doing with the present life and how we are impacting our incarnation, the present one, but also the future ones. And the question she asks here is very simple, yet kind of complex to be answered. What should we do in this very life to make our next incarnation better? Zen Buddhism is very insistent on the fact that what you can do to make this life better, what you can do to make today a better day, tomorrow a better day, to make people's lives in this world better right now, gives you a sense of urgency. Because we as spiritists, we tend to say, if I don't finish right now what I need to do, I'll do it in the next life, maybe in 2 lives or something like that. So that has a different name. That's procrastination. What we need to do it now. Why? Because probably this is our best life. This is our best existence. And again, what are we currently doing in this life, not in the next one? What can we do today and in our lives to make this incarnation the best of all? To make sure that this life is the best of all previous ones? To make sure that right now we are creating causes and conditions to be the best moment of all. And building on that, I'd like to ask you a few other questions that are quite useful in this matter, in this reflections. First of all, how well are we shaping our future incarnations? And one thing here, in corporate life, normally we say, okay, I'm going to have a 5 years plan, 10 years plan, 10 years, I want to be this, that. Hang on a minute. We're talking about a time horizon that's much longer here. And the question is, what decisions are we taking right now that will shape the person we will be, not in 5 years, but in 500, 1,000, 5,000, 15,000, 50,000 years? How are we shaping our future selves with our acts right now, with our choices? And here I prepared a list of questions just to continue on this reflection so we can try to understand a little bit where we are. And one question here: do I take advantage of every single opportunity to evolve and to become a better person? Do I make good use of my time? Much like St. Augustine used to do, what is the daily balance of my evolution? Can I put my head on a pillow every day and say that I was a little better person than the day before? Moreover, am I capable of loving more, of forgiving more, of being more kind and more charitable towards my fellow men and women? Do I solve everyday goodness, light, hope, peace, generosity along the way, wherever I go? Each day, am I a little bit less proud? Am I less selfish? Am I less difficult towards the people around me? And this is very important. Do I bring relief or distress to people's life? And probably this is my favorite one. How do people around me refer to me? With love, with affection, longing, or better yet, how do I want to be remembered? What memories do I want to leave in people's hearts? What kind of feelings I'm raising and printing in people's souls? And do these people want to be around me or away from me? Do I show gratitude towards life and for those who share their existence with me every day? If we're able at least to think about some of these questions, I think it's already a big step that we are doing in the present moment, in the present incarnation, in order to shape our future lives. And to wrap up, all these questions, as I mentioned, can help us to make deep reflections, of course, on the way we live and on its impacts on current and future incarnations. That's a fact. But most importantly, they might help us as a compass and to take the right decisions, decisions that will impact in the future. And we are the heirs of ourselves. Let's remember that the time is now, that this is the best chance that we have to build a better self, brighter future, either if for ourselves or for the planet, remembering that the planet is really the reflection of the humanity that lives on it. And to finish, we all know, we all agree that this is an intense moment we're going through as humankind, but we knew it would be like this when we decided to reincarnate, because we were aware of this incarnation. But we accepted the challenge, and this is good. So let's embrace it, and let's roll up the sleeves and enjoy the ride. Thank you very much. That may Jesus bless us all, and thank you for being with us in this talk. Peter?
Thank you so much, Daniel, for the reflections you provided. Please stay with us for the Q&A session. But first, here are some announcements. First, register today for the 13th Spiritist Federation of Florida Conference. Join us for an inspiring event that is called Jesus in Our Days. In it, we will explore the relevance of Jesus in our modern world. This in-person gathering will be held in Apopka, Florida on April 6th and 7th, 2024. English interpretation will be provided. Second, there is a weekly podcast-like series called Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna DeAngelis. A new episode is every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It is available on YouTube and Spotify. The Psychology and Spirituality weekly talks are based on the works of Joanna DeAngelis and will offer a safe place to confront, compare, correlate, and expand spirituality concepts from a psychological lens, bringing insights, actionable tips, and real-world advice to help you and I lead a better life. Third, the USSF has launched a new Spiritist app, Be My Hope, available now for download either on the App Store or on Google Play. This brand new app offers uplifting content in a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials. Download it now. Finally, last announcement. On the screen, please note there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone. Scan the QR code for your donation. Next, we will address comments or questions from the audience. By the way, there's still time for you to send in yours. Okay, so let's see what we have here.
Let's go, Peter.
First question. Okay, from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. How should we respond to those who do not accept reincarnation?
It's a very good question, Peter. And the answer is quite simple: with respect. We need to respect their beliefs. What we can do, we can enlighten those people. We can explain. We can give arguments. We can go through the principles of reincarnation and how logical they are. Many people stayed for centuries, thousands of years, without accepting this kind of belief. And this is something that we do not change from one day to another. The minute we accept that we are the results of the deeds and the choices and the multiple existences that we have, you know that we do not change like this. It takes time. But people at some point in time, and the best thing we can do, Peter, is show through our example. Okay, you don't believe in reincarnation, that's not a problem. But we agree on a lot of different things. And you can be respectful, you can be a loving person, you can be a charitable person, you can be a loving father or mother, and you can help people, and you can be there for the others, you can be a good friend, and you can be all of that. And even if the person is not aware of reincarnation, it doesn't really matter, because what counts is what they are doing. Once the person realizes, okay, it's a law, it makes sense, things will become much easier. But we cannot force anybody to believe in reincarnation. We can show with arguments, but the choice again, so it's free will. The person can accept, can choose to believe or not. We can provide the necessary information. But one thing will never be changed. The amount of good things that you do here will have an impact in your future life. And even if the person does not believe in any of that, so just look at the present life. The more you do good for humanity, the more this good comes back to you. And it's logical. It's as simple as that.
Okay. These are good points. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question. Also from the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Is there a single greatest purpose for why we experience reincarnation? And how might that process change over time?
It's a very good one as well. Yes, the single greatest purpose is evolution. So as we discussed during the presentation, and yes, that process changes over our existence, because as we evolve, our needs start to become different. So when we when you have the first incarnations as humans, we need to develop some sense of moral, some morality. We need to develop, intelligence. We need to develop emotional balance and things like that. And as we move forward, we start to develop a more accurate sense of a greater purpose, of a greater sense of belonging to higher family. Let's put it this way. So what happens is that we change as well, and depending on how things are evolving, we will need different trials, and we're going to replace the suffering with trials, with love, with experiences that will contribute us to accelerate our evolution and our progress as a human being. And when we see the books of Kardec, when he speaks about the evolution of different worlds, we start from the very primitive ones, then we go for trials and atonements, and then regeneration, and then up to the happy or celestial worlds. The humanity that is there is different, and they went through this process up to a point that the reincarnation, as we know it in very physical, dense bodies, will no longer be necessary. But it is there because once we reincarnate, the experiences that we have make us also evolve faster. When we are in the errant world, in the spiritual world, in between incarnations, what happens is that we do learn up to a certain point. Then we said, now it's time to go back to go again back to the flesh, so I can accelerate some processes. Read some of the books also from André Louise or Chico Xavier and so on. They're very clear examples of people that were in the spiritual world and they had a lot of problems in their spiritual body that couldn't be healed in the spiritual world. They needed to go back to the flesh. So the therapy, the incarnation being there as a therapy, would speed up the process of healing. We could go on, but I think that's already a few nice examples.
Okay, yeah, those are good points. It's also fascinating how reincarnation can help us make progress without us being fully conscious of what's happening.
Exactly. No, this is true. This is true. Yeah.
Okay. Next question from Daniel Santos. Are there any scientific observations or experiments that could support the existence of reincarnation?
Yes, there are some. I'm not really an expert of all these experiments, but if I might advise something, there are different videos that we can find on YouTube and so on, showing experiences that have been done, especially when we see children, small children, when they are explaining, they are telling things that normally those things are said by adults. And then you see them speaking of previous lives, previous situations that a child that is 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old wouldn't be possible, wouldn't be capable of doing that. More recently, there was this documentary that was launched by Netflix. I think it's Life After Death, that shows very different and specific cases of reincarnation. And for me, the most interesting one, the most powerful one, is the example of a little boy that was the reincarnation of an American pilot that lost his life in a battle in Japan in the Second World War. And as a kid, it was like 3, 4, or 5 years, he had horrible nightmares. And he used to draw all the time the pilot, the planes, and he repeated names and so on. And his father, who couldn't withstand the idea of reincarnation, he started to do some research on that, going through documents and so on, and he was able to confirm every single piece of information that was said there. Another thing as well, so more and more, we have the mediums, with spirits communicate through the mediums, but more and more we have experiments through different equipments, electronic equipments, using those as a medium of communication. Then the spirits can go there and leave words. I think it's called intercommunication. There's a name for that. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now. But through electronic devices, they can communicate. Well, if someone else, say the spirit, is communicating there, it's because this someone else is still alive and one day might come back. So these evidences, they are everywhere. And the thing is that it depends on what kind of protocol science will accept, because they have I've worked with scientists and I know how their minds work. So sometimes they are quite stubborn and they really require specific protocol that is widely accepted and so on. And sometimes you get questions, oh, well, this is true. Why it's not on the cover of the Nature, scientific magazine? Because sometimes, depending on what you call, what protocol you utilize, not everybody accepts, but evidences, they are there and they are widely known.
Okay. By the way, Joao Korngold had a similar question, Daniel Santos, in which he's asking about the latest scientific evidence for reincarnation. Anything you want to add to that? Have you heard of any fairly recent studies that?
No. I think I mentioned already. But it's true that what is, if I might add something, is that
Mhm.
there is there's a search that has become more intense with that respect. So
Mhm.
saying a few words about the European reality right now. So
Okay.
people, they are looking for something other than the flesh, other than the physical existence, and people are looking more and more for spirituality. And in this process, there is a quest for more about the reincarnation, about the afterlife, about the spiritual life, and this is continuing and this is increasing, Peter. And it's a
Mm.
matter of time until we start to get more and more stronger evidences. And again, as I mentioned to you, if you don't want to believe in any of that, you will always find an excuse not to. And
Sure.
even if you come with very good medical protocols and so on, what we see also a lot here in Europe is the association between medicine and spirituality. And this is something because people go there, see people that are actually being healed by other methods that are not, let's say, so-called, scientific ones. That's what they
Mhm.
call energetic medicine. And we see more and more. And people say, well, there's evidence of something else. It's not just the physical thing that we are seeing here. There's something else. And it's getting stronger and stronger here in Europe.
So it kind of gets into the question of whether or not everything about the nature of our existence is really driven merely by a physical cause.
Exactly. 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 That's it.
Mhm.
Perfect.
Okay, let's see what next question we have from the United States Spiritist Federation. As a law of nature, reincarnation holds us responsible and accountable for our actions. Daniel, do you have any reflections for why some people persist in wrongdoing as if consequences do not exist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
It's a little bit the discussion that we were having in the first question. I
Mhm.
think so. So again, we are the results of our choices, our deeds, everything that we have done in the past lives. Suppose that we have been here, we've been around this planet for like 10,000 years, 12,000 years, 15, 20,000 years. The thing is that most of this time, just to refer to planet Earth, okay? Most of this time, we've been going from one incarnation to another like this without being conscious of what we were doing. If we are right here, right now, having this kind of discussions, it's probably because one incarnation ago, maybe two, something inside ourselves woke up and said, okay,
Mm.
let me try to change. Let me look for something else, something different, something more spiritual. So it's very recent, our awakening, if I could put it like that. And some people still spend a lot of time in the wrongdoings, in the most material part, and the most, let's say, brutal part of ourselves. Because
Mm.
I mean, so we have those different lives and so on. Modern psychology says the same. So when we address our psychological problems and so on, sometimes we're just going for the tip of the iceberg, but then there's a lot underneath that needs to be addressed. And I think that many people, still choose to stay on that side because it's easier, because don't need to change. I mean, it's nice to change, but sometimes it's a heck of a work to change. So not everybody wants that. In life, that's only one thing we know for sure about life. It's a permanent change. And not everybody wants to accept that. Not everybody's willing to accept that. So it's easier to stay where we have always been. And I believe it goes in that way. And some people really have a hard time on letting go because some people are really attached to power, to the current status, and to not want to change. And this is horrible because if you don't do that, at some point in time, life will take care of you through compulsory reincarnation and so on. Or even people that are not really more aligned to the life as such in a planet and will be expelled and go to another one. with, more primitive than what we have here. And that's what we are seeing in our planet right now in the spiritual world. So,
Okay, thank you for that answer.
thank you.
Next question from the Spiritist Network. How can we respectfully engage in discussions about reincarnation with people of different beliefs and backgrounds?
Yeah, that's a very good one. I feel there was a very nice chapter again, the Gospel according to Spiritism. I think it's chapter number 5, where the spirits ask a lot of questions about the current status of people, and asking how can you explain that some people are born with disabilities, some people are born with mental illnesses without doing anything to get there. The example we saw, Jesus, the blind person, how people, some people, we have the impression that everything goes really well, just flows very smoothly, and some people cannot even move forward, have a lot of problems and so on. When you look at that, this anomalies, this injustice, and so on, you say, well, either we are all facing a very unjust God, or life is really, really unfair, or there is something else, something behind all that that could explain. And life is logical. And what I really like to do, because I've got in my family some people that do not believe in reincarnation or religion, whatever. They always do I just sort of flip the situation. The sense is, okay, let's say that there's a 50% chance that reincarnation exists or not. So if you're telling me that does not exist, it's 50%. You might be right, but my 50% tells me that I'm right. So we call it even, or please provide me with a better explanation of what you have. If you don't have one, it's not a problem, but at least consider, think about that. And if you cannot understand or cannot accept it, just see the impact of knowing that you're the result of what you're doing, choosing, making right now. Look at that. And if you believe in reincarnation, maybe you can change a few things. And then later on, it will be better. So that's not, I wouldn't say, Peter, that there's a magic wand to say, hey, but stop believing it. No. Well, we can be very respectful and say, look at this is some in the Bible, you can see a lot of examples, as we discussed it earlier today, that really that show that the reincarnation was present there. And again, so there is also still in the Gospel according to Spiritism, or Hell and Heaven, one of the books of Kardec, there is a very thorough analysis on the destinations of the soul after death. And it is very, very, very powerful, because you say, okay, so we believe this and that, so what is the alternative? It does not make any sense. But the things that normally when we engage with in such a discussion, there's a lot of feelings and pre-ideas that are there, and sometimes it's a bit tricky. But with logic and with a lot of patience and a lot of love, we can maybe do some progress.
Okay, thank you. These are very good points. All right, this will be our last question.
Okay.
From the U.S. Spiritist Federation. Some find reincarnation to be a calming reassurance that drives our existence. Others find it threatening or something to dread. What do you think?
I think it's calming and reassurance. I think it's really exciting, to be honest, because let's think about it for a moment. And I'm taking an example of some people in my family. Suppose that the death is the end of it, and period. What is the point of being born, learning a lot of things, working a lot, having your family and so on, and all of a sudden it goes away, and you find yourself in the middle of nothing? You go back to nothing? That doesn't seem logical to me. Then the threatening or to dread. You feel threatened, and you feel, uncomfortable with things that you do not know. If we can study, if we can try to understand what is behind the reincarnation, what is behind the multiple lives, it doesn't look that scary anymore. Because again, so everything that I was being able to build in like 80, 70, 90, 100 years of existence, that will not be lost. No, that was a very good investment that I can carry on with me to the spiritual world. I can improve that and then come back even better than what I used to be.
Mhm.
So why is that dreadful? Why is that scary? It really depends on how you feel it. I mean, so uh, we have a family here, and we lose, let's say, father, your mother, your wife, your husband. Being sure that that person will be there alive, waiting for you, or at least continue to be part of your life, and even better, that that person that you loved so much will continue to exist and be part of another life. For me, that's exciting, not scary. So, but
Mhm.
again, as I mentioned to you, something that has to be respected because we have been told for thousands of years that reincarnation does not exist, or that's something that should be feared, or something that is against God's law. No, and then to revert that takes time, but
Mhm.
it's a very exciting perspective. That's at least that's the way I see it, Peter.
Right. So, whatever our attitude is about reincarnation, it has to be a natural process as to how we
Exactly.
get them in terms of our
Exactly. We cannot force anything. Yeah.
correct. Okay, thank you, Daniel, and thank you everyone who has supported this live every week. Next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, please don't miss our next live when Anna Moreno will be discussing the topic autoimmune conditions and spiritism. Daniel, before we close this live, can you do a prayer for us, please?
Yes, I can, with pleasure. And thanks again, Peter, and for the United States Spiritist Federation for the invitation. I really enjoyed this talk. It's
It's
really,
been a
really
pleasure to have you. Mhm.
okay. So I'll invite everyone to close his or her eyes and to find a comfortable position where you are right now. Take a deep breath, and right now, just be thankful. Thankful for the moments we spent together. Thankful for beautiful lives that we have, the opportunity we have in this existence. The fact that we are loved people, we are capable of loving, of forgiving. And right now, we take all these feelings and we elevate it to the Heavenly Father, asking Him for more peace in our planet, asking Him for more love, more understanding, more forgiveness around the globe. May all of us that is around this table right now become a point of light, and may that light grow and merge to each one of the lights coming from the friends around this table. And may this light go around the globe, around the planets, soothing the souls of those who suffer, who are in desperation, who are looking for peace, who are looking for forgiveness, who are looking for a better condition of life. May Jesus bless this lovely planet that we call home. And may all of you, all of us, keep in our hearts the feeling we're experiencing right now, this feeling of peace and love. Amen. So